Hi, welcome to the workshop on stargazing, brought to you by Young-Scientist. I'm Satish and I will be the facilitator for today's session. In this video, we shall see the basics of amateur astronomy and specifically the practice of naked eye stargazing. This means that we will not be using a telescope or binoculars. If you have them, well and good. Humans have been looking at the night sky with nothing but their eyes for a very long time. This raises the question, how long? What is the history behind this practice? It seems that we have been doing this since prehistoric times. We can say so because archaeologists have found cave paintings that depict star constellations. In this photograph, we can see one such painting that was made in France over 17,000 years ago. This means that humans have a fundamental fascination to the night sky. What could be the reason? Maybe it is because the night sky is separate from what happens on the planet. We can interact with plants, animals, other humans, and we can change things here. But the sky is untouchable. It's beyond our reach. Some might even say that it is eternal and even divine. Maybe that's why they point at the sky when they talk about heavens and other related stuff. Even though we now have telescopes, naked eye stargazing remains a popular activity. This is because one can learn a lot of things from it. This practice helps us to improve our observational skills and also our eyesight. Studies have shown that people who have years of experience studying the night sky are able to see celestial objects that an inexperienced person is not able to see. Also, even if you have a telescope, you need to know where to point it to see the things you want to see. And even without a telescope, there is a lot you can see with the naked eye. So, what can we see? I'm sure you can think of a few different things. Why don't we start with the brightest object in the night sky? Yes, you guessed it right. The moon, also known as Luna. Despite being the brightest object in the night sky, the moon does not produce its own light. It only reflects the light from the sun. In doing so, it behaves like a big mirror in the sky. In this photograph, we see the moon entirely. This is also known as the full moon. However, As days goes on, the full moon will become smaller and eventually appears to vanish. When this happens, we call it the new moon. This is because the following day, a new moon begins to appear and starts to grow until it becomes full again. This cycle repeats itself. This cycle is also known as the lunar cycle. Many cultures have created calendars based on the lunar cycle. This is because the number of days between the two full moons is always the same. Therefore, the moon behaves like a big clock in the sky. Now, what is a night sky without some, yes, stars? There is a lot to be said about stars. You might know that the sun is also a star. However, the sun doesn't look like its brothers during the night time because the sun is much closer to us. Ancient humans used these stars to draw figures in the sky. Yes, they connected these dots and then they saw some interesting shapes. We call these shapes as constellations. Now, these drawings might seem like scribbles to you, but to ancient humans they represented important objects, figures, and even gods. To give you an example, the constellation Scorpius represents a scorpion. During the activity time, we shall try to identify a few of these constellations in the sky. Depending on where you are and what time of the year it is, the constellation you find will change. These constellations are groups of stars, and stars are famous for twinkling. Yes, you might even remember a famous song about it. There are also objects like stars in the sky that do not twinkle. They are in fact planets. On a good night, one may be able to see up to 5 planets without using a telescope. Some of the planets are brighter than the others. The brightest planet a person can see is the Venus. It is also known as the evening star or the morning star. Despite the name, it is not a star but a planet. It is called so because it is the first object we can see in the sky when the sun rises or when it sets. Maybe I should say it is the last star in the sky when the sun begins to rise, and it's the first star in the sky when the sun sets. One must remember that Venus is a planet and not a star. It is also the brightest object in the sky, in the night sky, after the moon. After Venus, some of the brightest planets are Mercury and Mars. Mars is quite easy to spot because it's bright red. Mercury is quite bright, but it's rather small and makes it difficult to spot. If you're far away from the city and without light pollution, you may be able to see Saturn, and if you're lucky, even Jupiter. By using binoculars, it becomes easier to spot Saturn and Jupiter. If you have a telescope, you might even be able to see the moons of Saturn and Jupiter. Speaking of being lucky, there is a celestial object that one has to be quite lucky to see. Yes, comets. One of the most famous comet is the Halley's Comet, which appears in the sky only once in every 75 years. There are many superstitions associated with comets, but mostly they do not have any scientific basis. Comets are visitors from beyond the solar system. They develop the tail when they become closer to the sun. We can talk more about comets later. If you're interested in seeing the Halley's Comet, I'm afraid you have to wait for another 40 years. But don't worry, you can see comet-like objects if you're lucky. Yes, I'm talking about meteors, also known as shooting stars. Despite the name, these are not stars, although they do look like stars and they happen to fall to the ground. They are in fact made up of small stones that find their way to the earth, and when they fall to the ground, they burn brightly in the atmosphere, creating a beautiful sight. Now, if one is really lucky and is able to go to a place far away from cities and light pollution, you might be able to see, yes, the Milky Way galaxy. To be precise, you will be able to see a part of the Milky Way galaxy. This is because we are already in it. The Sun, the solar system, is part of the Milky Way galaxy. In this photograph, we can see a streak of white cloud-like thing on the night sky. This is made up of millions and millions of stars. So many stars that we are not able to tell them apart. That's why it looks like a white smear on the night sky. The night sky is truly a rich place. There are so many things that you can see, and you don't even need a telescope. So what are we waiting for? Let's go out when it's dark and let's look up into the sky and try to identify some stars, maybe some constellations, perhaps a planet, and if we are truly lucky, we might even see a shooting star. And if you do, don't forget to make a wish.